Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, very excited to invite you. Is it working?
Yeah, we just admitted someone else into the.
Oh, okay, fine, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, very excited to host everybody at today's event. We've got a star speaker, Vanessa Woolf, here to talk to us with story tales on the subject of madness and health and mental health. To mention, this is an event hosted by Chabad Lubavitch of Islington and funded by ArtsCouncil England. Vanessa, take it away.
Okay. Hello. Welcome, hello. Well, hello everybody. My name is Vanessa Woolf and I am a professional storyteller. So, a storyteller is somebody who, not only do I tell stories, so I tell stories to adults and to children, but I'm also really fascinated by stories. So I've got myths and legends and folk tales and true stories and histories and urban legends and all kinds of things just running around in my head all the time. And I'm always thinking, what would be a good story for this or for that? So when the rabbi invited me to come and tell a story about Judaism and mental health, I was thinking, what story would be good? And this particular story kind of very quickly came to mind. So I'm going to tell you the story in a minute. And it's all about, as you said, it's all about madness. So in order for me to tell this, I wanted to go back to the source material, and I also wanted to think around it and see if I could find any other versions of the story. And in fact, the rabbi actually told me a different ending already, so I already had two versions. And I spoke to some of my other friends who are also storytellers, and one of them told me about how this story was really, really personally relevant to her. As someone who's caring for someone who sometimes struggles with mental health issues. And another one of my storytelling friends said, this story reminds me of the tale of Nebuchadnezzar. Is that right? Did I say it right? Okay, so I'm trying to give the correct pronunciation. Nebuchadnezzar, who was the great king. And I was like, I'll look that up. And I looked it up and gosh darn it, she was right. So I'm going to start off by telling you that story first. I'll just give you a very brief overview. It's a story from scripture. So King Nebuchadnezzar was, he lived about 2,600 years ago. And he was a Babylonian king. And he was very mighty, and he had loads of battles, and he was great building, and he was always kind of bigging himself up, doing all this amazing work. And one of the things he did was invade Jerusalem, and he said to his soldiers, I want you to find their greatest treasure, which is their people. I want you to find the four most beautiful, most wise, most highborn, most brilliant, most intelligent men and bring them to me because I want to have them for myself. So he took them and their names, let's see if I can get this right, Daniel, Hananiah, and Azariah, and Mishael. And he took them to his Babylonian palace, and what he said was, you have new names, you have new identities, you wear new clothes, speak a new language. And this, of course, was very, very painful for Daniel and his friends. And he ended up doing his best to keep kosher and all of those things in secret. All kinds of problems, and you have them being thrown into the fiery furnace, and you have Daniel being put in the lion's den, and all kinds of things. However, Daniel was very trusted by the king. because the king could see how wise he was and how he seemed to know all kinds of things. Anyway, one day, King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream about a great and mighty tree which was chopped down at the roots, and this dream bothered him and worried him, and he asked Danielle, what am I? And Danielle said, I am so sorry to say this, but the tree is you. And then nothing happened for a year. And then, after a year had passed, I'm going to read for you now. As the king Nebuchadnezzar was walking on the roof of a royal palace in Babylon, he said, is this not the great Babylon I have built as a royal residence by my mighty power for the glory of my majesty? And even as the words were on his lips, a voice came from heaven. This is what is decreed for you. Your royal authority has been taken from you. You will be driven away from people. You will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like the ox. And immediately, what had been said happened. He was driven away from people. He ate grass like the ox. His body was drenched with the dew of heaven, so he lived outside. And his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle, and his nails like the claws of a bird. So he lost his mind. And later he gets it back. And of course, there's a story about faith there, isn't there? There's a story about someone who thought that they were more powerful than people mighty themselves and got punished. Yeah, so that's one story. But there's also, it's a story about madness. And I thought, I wonder if anyone really does ever believe that they turned into an animal. Like if that's a thing. And so I looked it up, and do you know, it is a thing. So it is called clinical lycanthropy. So lycanthropy means werewolf. Yes, so you're a werewolf, and you're clinically a werewolf. And I looked up a little case study for you. Here you are. I should read it. A 20-year-old man was admitted after he became increasingly agitated and showed erratic behaviours at home, starting about 5 weeks before his admission. On initial evaluation, he seemed guarded and internally preoccupied. He gave brief responses and had prolonged latency of speech, so he'd take ages to answer. His thought processes were disrupted, apparently due to lack of attention. He had no significant previous psychiatric history. He'd been using alcohol and marijuana occasionally, and a family history of bipolar disorder was present. He started on risperidone, which is a drug for new onset of psychosis, but then laboratory testing showed that he couldn't take it, so they had to basically stop him having those drugs. And then, over the next few days, the patient displayed increasingly psychotic, animal-like behaviours. He howled loudly in his room. He broke into a run abruptly in the hallway. At times, he crawled on the floor on all 4 limbs. He apparently appeared to be internally stimulated. His affect changed without any external triggers. So sometimes he'd smile and sometimes he'd look very angry for no apparent reason. When asked about these abnormal behaviours, he gave evasive responses. Eventually, he revealed that he believed he was a werewolf and that he periodically transformed into a wolf. So he truly believed that. He was started on ziprasidone, which was another, obviously, antipsychotic drug, and they gave him a really high dose of it in the end, and his symptoms rapidly responded. He reported voices had diminished, thought processes become more organised, and he gradually stopped believing that he was a werewolf. So that is clinical lycanthropy, and when I was reading about it, I found that it's not just wolves. You can believe yourself to be all kinds of animals, birds, snakes, all kinds of things, and sometimes you will just act like that animal, Or sometimes you'll tell people that you are that animal, even though you're plainly and evidently not. So anyway. Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you can.
I mean, kind of on the idea of kind of people thinking themselves animals, it just kind of how you associate it, and it just makes me think that on one hand you've got the extreme of it. I am a werewolf, or I am some other type of animal. Alternatively, a person thinks, like we call people animals, but it's not as extreme as that. Oh, they are a pig and the snorting around, but the behaviours that we associate to that animal.
That's very interesting. So you were saying that it's like when people, you call somebody an animal, and a further reading for that piece was that the patient had done a lot of reading about werewolves, and if they're very responsive apparently to being called things. So if you plant a seed in their brain that that's what they are, then they will start to believe that that's what they are. So it's a very interesting subject. But anyway, getting onto the story. So the story that I wanted to share with you was originally told by Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, and he was the great grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. So he was Hasidic, and he was very full of joy, and he was full of gentleness, and he also suffered himself, they just say, from melancholy and from sadness as well, and he recognized it in other people, and so he was always very gentle in the way that he approached other people, and very patient with other people. If they seemed like they were on the wrong path or something like that, he would be very kind of loving and gentle in the way that he would kind of try and put them in the right place. So anyway, that's something to bear in mind when I tell you this story. Are you ready? Once upon a time, there was a mighty king, and had a queen, had a kingdom, had a massive army, and he was so blessed. He had a son, it was going to be his son and his heir, who was so gifted and strong and handsome and intelligent, and was going to be great in battle, was incredibly brave, and just, very learned, loved books, loved reading, was just the best, absolutely best son. And this king was so powerful. He was just point to go, get me that, and then bring it to him. He'd go, that person, send them away, and they just had to go, whatever it was. Anyway, one day he was with his son, who's still a boy, but really getting ready to become this fantastic young man. And his son was reading, and then his son suddenly took off his clothes, squatted down underneath the table, started going, At first, everybody laughed a little uncomfortably, but they thought it must be a joke. But he didn't stop. He just stayed underneath the table, squatting, no clothes on, like that. And the time went on, and it came for time to dinner. And the king said, "Now you have to get out. It's time to eat. You have to go and you have to eat and you have to meet people." And he was like, he goes, "Oh no, I can't eat anything." Go, I'm not a boy anymore. I'm a rooster. And the king said, "You're not. Look at yourself." And he went, "Oh, I am looking. I'm a rooster." Refused to eat any food that night. He said he wouldn't eat anything. He said the only thing that he would eat was seed, and he would not eat it from the table either. He would only eat it if it was scattered under the table. And he would just peck at it. He wouldn't use his hands. He would just peck at it like that, which meant, of course, he was barely eating anything. They put down a cup for him, and then the king said, "You have to come out, or I will beat you." He wouldn't come out. He wouldn't say anything. He didn't even respond to that one. And the king, who had been so happy and so full of joy of his son, was now beyond worried, because nobody could know that his son was behaving like this. And eventually he got his physician, who he was really, really trusted. And he said, this is really, really secret. You have to do something about him. And he had a look at him and he said, Your Highness, he said, it's time to come out now. See how cold you are? Look at all your goose pimples. Yeah, you need to get some clothes on. Come on out, you go. And no, I got my clothes. And he said, I'm going to have to, I'll crush up some special herbs, some psychotic, crazy herbs. So I crushed up some crazy herbs. He was like, right, drink this. Boy wouldn't. He would only have it if they were put on seeds and sprinkled down. Finally, they were sprinkled down, the boy picked up the seeds. Ooh, a little crazy for a bit. Didn't stop him from clucking and squatting naked under the table. The king called in his holy men. He called in his most wise advisors. He called in everybody who he could think of. And they shouted, they ordered, they begged, they pleaded, they were angry, they did everything, and nothing worked. And the king was in despair, and one of his friends, who he trusted very much, said to him, there's this wise old sage who lives out in the desert, and he can do anything, but you have to trust him because he's very eccentric. So the king was like, anything, I don't mind, just bring this wise old sage. So the wise old sage was summoned, bring him, and he was brought, and he was really bent over, and he had this massive long beard nearly down to the floor, and he was like, he said, He said, well, I can do it, but you have to trust me. And the king was like, yeah, I've heard that. I'm like, yes, okay, you're trusted. Then he goes, right. The sage just takes off his clothes, and he squats down under the table too, and he starts going, like that. And the king's like, what is he doing? So anyway, the king was taken out, and the sage, like that. And the boy looked at him and said, are you a rooster too? I have been so lonely. Oh yeah, he goes, I'm a rooster. Any seed around here? Oh, it's great around here. And they're plucking and picking up seed all day long. And the next day was cold. And the sage goes, he goes, oh, I'm freezing. And he goes and he gets the robe and he puts it on. And the boy goes, he goes, oh, you're wearing human clothes. You can't do that. And the sage goes, if a rooster puts on a boot, if a rooster puts on a robe, does it stop him being a rooster? No. And the prince was like, oh, great. Of course not. I'll go and get a jacket on. So he got some pajamas on. And anyway, they're clucking around. The next thing, of course, it was the meal. The sage was hungry. He had human food bought and put under the table. He's eating it, plucking away at it. And the boy goes, is it all right to have that? And he goes, well, yeah, we roosters can eat anything we like. So anyway, they were eating the human food. You can guess how the story goes, yeah. One thing after another, the sage would say, just because you're wearing clothes, just because you're standing up, just because you're talking to your family, doesn't mean that you're not a rooster. You can still be a rooster and do all of those things. And so the boy ended up completely normal, back to normal, doing all his normal behaviours. So, and that's the end, yes? So he's cured. So I have a question, and I'm going to put it to you in the room, and I'm also going to put it to anyone who's on Zoom who might be there, which is, what was different about the old sage's approach to curing the madness? Yes.
There is community in it.
Community. That's really, really good. Yes. So he invites the boy to be part of what he's doing, and he joins what the boy's doing. Yes. He joins what the boy's doing. He joins that community. Yes.
He tricks the boy.
He tricks the boy because he's pretending that he believes he's a rooster, where really he doesn't think that.
Well,
He doesn't think he's a rooster, does he? The old sage. He's pretending.
No, A,
Yeah.
and B, he tricks the boy to think that he's still a rooster, despite putting on all of these things.
He does. He does. We'll get onto that in a minute. First of all, I want to go a little more deeply into what you said, which was he meets the boy in the place that the boy is. So one of my friends told me that it's about speaking the same language as the person who's going through their difficulties and their troubles, rather than coming, as all the others were doing, and going, well, you're just wrong, so stop being wrong immediately, going, let me get beside you in your wrongness even, and we can find our way out together. So it's a story of healing, and most people take that story as a story of healing. But just like with the previous story, which is a story about faith, but it's also a story about madness, this is a story about healing, but it's also a story, again, about madness. And the thing that you were about to say, Rabbi, which was the boy was tricked, is really important. So I'd like to invite, if you wouldn't mind, do you mind coming in quickly, just saying how you have heard that story told?
Thank you, Vanessa. So I can't quack and I can't act as well as you can, but we're going to go through the entire story without me saying it again, but we're going to go all the way up till the point that this child is healed. However, the one line that I'm going to take away, if I may, is they lived happily ever after. And now we're going to add an alternative continuation to the story, which is the next day, everyone's happy. Everyone's, this is great. The day after, everyone's great, everyone's happy. Comes the third day, and to everyone's dismay, the boy is back on the floor, clothing off, pecking at the seeds, and doing all the clacking noises again. And what's going on? They all come to us, what's going on? What happened? We thought and the boy says, in the quacking voice, of course, the boy says, if I'm not dressed like a chicken, and I'm not eating like a chicken, and I'm not talking like a chicken, then how am I a chicken?
Thank you. And that is a really, really key part of the story that I've always found really fascinating, and one of the things that gives that story so much depth, because of course that ending can be applied in many ways, but let's start off by thinking about it as it's about identity. So it's about who am I really? Who really am I? Am I a rooster wearing human clothes, talking to humans, or am I a prince? That's the thing. And when I heard you tell that ending, I thought back to the Nebuchadnezzar story, and what he had done, the king had done, was he had taken 4 Jews and he had forced them to become Babylonians. So he had basically stolen their identities from them, their so important identities. And his punishment was to have his identity entirely taken from him, which is so poetic, isn't it? And I think our identity is really, really key to our mental health. And so I just wanted to, I'm about finished, although we can have questions afterwards if people want, but I just wanted to finish with one story that I heard a little while ago, which was about a man who lived in the USSR. And he went to great pains to build a secret mikvah under his block of flats, like a ritual bath. So really important part of Jewish life. And so it was incredibly difficult to build. He had to do it kind of all by hand, and he would get in really, really bad trouble if he did it. And anyway, so he did it, and he had it there for many, many years. And when he finally went to Israel, everyone said, that must have been so difficult. Why did you do it? And he said, without the mikveh, how do I know that I'm Jewish? And without that, he would have been so torn apart inside, because he would have felt like he wasn't him. He didn't have his own identity. And so I guess the thought that I want to leave you with is that having a sort of harmonious sense of who you are is a really key part of healing and mental health. So I guess the outside fitting the inside, the outside feeling like it's the same thing as the inside. And that's one of the many amazing insights from these wonderful Jewish stories.
Would anyone from Zoom like to? Come in here to mention any comments? Joe, Grace? No. Okay, that's fine.
Hello, sorry. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, yes, we can hear you.
Hi. Hello, Vanessa.
I can't see you because the fans are all the way around.
Oh, thank you so much. I just the other thing that the story, the Rooster Prince story reminds me of very strongly is I don't know if anybody is familiar with polyvagal theory. That is a psychological theory about how, as communal animals, we co-regulate each other. And I think it's such a brilliant and old story of how, if you get under the table with somebody, you are co-regulating them. So when someone is dysregulated in their behavior and their feelings, we as human beings have so much strength in that moment to come alongside them. So yeah, thank you.
Absolutely beautiful. I think that's such a wonderful insight about how much we need our community around us in order to be ourselves and to have strong, resilient mental health.
I'm just occurs to me. I think there's another perhaps discussion, which is, version one of the parable feels like we need to intervene with this person's, mental health to go and make them better. Well, that's the conclusion of it. And the way we do that is by coming, and it's a nice message. Part one. Version number two is saying, actually, maybe we should have not been intervening. And it was better that we leave them alone. And, I guess sometimes, how do we know when it's the right, but what things do we say, that's your key identity, and leave it, versus what things, no, we need to intervene in.
Well, that is really, really interesting, isn't it? So there are some people who are artists and they're highly eccentric, but they should, we say, be allowed to just carry on doing their wonderful eccentric thing, and that's just them. And when, as a storyteller, of course, I'm really interested in how you tell the stories. So if I was telling your version of the story, then I would probably have him quite happy under the table, and quite fulfilled under the table. And really, he's escaping all that awful king stuff that he doesn't want to do. He doesn't want to have battles. He wants to be a happy rooster, clucking at seed and being free. And so, I would tell it like that. But if I'm telling it the other way for the first ending, then I'd have him cold and hungry and, lonely. And that's how I would tell it. And so it's really, they're really, really interesting interweaving versions of the story about two very differently but connected concepts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
I guess I also have a comment about it's then about the distress the family feels towards their loved one and towards kind of like the perception that their family member, that the prince is unwell. And then even in the story, they have a very kind of clear idea of how to intervene, but also kind of, that distress around somebody very clearly unwell and the support system not quite knowing, kind of like it's such a gray area of how to intervene in a way that's, if to intervene, how to intervene in a way that's actually good for the person, and how to deal with the distress around it in a way.
Yeah, that's really, that's so important, isn't it? So I think that a big part of mental health is the impact on the people who are around. And actually that's a whole nother aspect of the story, isn't it? So again, in my telling of that, I kind of didn't really delve into that because that's really something else again. So yes.
No, I mean, I think the highlight on that point was that the king, the parent, out of the care and love and belief in this child, doesn't give up and keeps on finding alternative methods until eventually they find the right methods. That would maybe be
That's lovely. Yeah, I really like that one. Yeah, that's right. It keeps on trying. But I do think that one of the things that we find when we're looking at issues about mental health is that there's still so much we don't know. And there's still so much that we feel like we desperately want to help people with depression and things like that. And still we don't have all the answers at all. And mental health is one of those things that you can kind of leave you feeling quite helpless if you see someone who you care about suffering. So I think that's so relevant. Yeah. Great.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you very
Thank you so
much.
much. It was brilliant.
Thank you for having me.